Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Federal Lab and Defense Innovations and Technology Opportunities for Business Development. Before we get started, I would like to take a few moments to go over a few housekeeping items. My name is Eric and I am the webinar organizer for today. We want to make sure today's presentation is extremely valuable for you, so we ask that you submit all questions by clicking on the question button in the control panel and typing your question there. Right now, please join me in welcoming Howard Thompson, Senior Director of Business Growth and Development Services with the Greater Cleveland Partnership. Howard.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone to really what I'm hoping is a very informative opportunity for you to learn some further information about some of our defense and federal lab opportunities that we have, and they'll talk about that are available for you. We have a really great lineup today, and I'm just going to give a quick introduction to our speakers and then let them continue. But I'd like to welcome Dr. Marla Perez-Davis, who is the Director of NASA Glenn Research Center, Paul Solinsky, who is the Executive Director of the Federal Laboratory Consortium. Sean Davis is with us, and he's the Business Operations Lead for the Strategic Microelectronics Division at the Naval Surface Warfare Center in Crane. And I'd like to welcome Brooke Pine. She is the Strategic and Spectrum Missions Advanced Resilient Trusted Systems Program Director. So thank you all for participating. And if I could, I will begin the presentation by welcoming our first speaker, Dr. Marla Perez-Davis. She's the Director of the NASA John H. Glenn Research Center in Cleveland. In this position, she is responsible for planning, organizing, and directing the activities required in accomplishing the missions assigned to the center. The Glenn staff consists of more than 3,200 civil service and support contractor employees and has a budget of over $900 million. Prior to becoming the director, Dr. Perez-Davis served as Glenn's deputy director. And from here, I'd like to welcome, and please begin the slides, Dr. Perez-Davis. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. Great to be here with all of you today. So Eric, I'm assuming we are in slide number 1, which is the title page. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, can we go to slide number 2?
Yep.
So we'd like to start with just a brief introduction about what, where we have been and where we are and where we're going. NASA Glenn Research Center, many of you have seen the logo next to the Cleveland Hobson Airport, was founded in 1941. It was initially called the Aircraft Engine Research Laboratory, and it served as a National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics Research Lab and was responsible for key aeronautics advances during World War II. When NASA was formed in 1958, the facility was absorbed and renamed NASA Lewis Research Center. It remained NASA Lewis until 1999, when we renamed it in honor of the late John H. Glenn, the first American to orbit the Earth. Throughout our center history, Glenn has been the to-go center for everything from jet engines to second stage rockets to cutting-edge deep space propulsion systems. And we have been instrumental in developing terrestrial, aerospace, and planetary power systems. Today, we remain vital as the agency primary power and propulsion research center. We lead in the space solar electric propulsion system. I will talk a little bit more about that later. You probably saw the news a couple of months ago about the Orion spacecraft. We manage the development and integration of the Orion spacecraft European service module, and we house some of the world's most capable facilities for simulated in-space environmental testing, and that facility is in NASA Plum Brook Station in Sandusky, Ohio. We are the agency leader in developing advanced materials and structure, some of them shaped memory alloys, and we develop aircraft power and propulsion systems that will usher hybrid and fully electric aircraft into the skies in the coming decades, and I will talk a little bit more about that as well. Slide number 3. In the field of aeronautics, NASA Glenn supports both the traditional and emerging aviation markets. We see the electrification of aircraft as the key component to the future of commercial aircraft. Our aero efforts at Glenn center on electrification of propulsion systems and the development of required subsystems, with the ultimate goal of enabling a paradigm shift from gas turbine to more electric aircraft propulsion. We are partnering with the aviation industry, including engine manufacturers like GE, to investigate the opportunities and challenges associated with the system development for aircraft aviation. NASA Glenn, also at the Plum Brook facility in Sandusky, has built a dedicated facility called the NASA Electric Aircraft Test Bed, we call it NEAT, to provide system-level testing capabilities for these electronic components. The test bed, which recently conducted its first megawatt scale test, take advantage of the facility's massive amount of power to carry out research on technology development of aircraft electrical powertrains. The ultimate goal is to transfer commercial aviation by using new electric propulsion technologies that meet NASA aircraft level requirements for energy use, life cycle carbon, landing and takeoff emission, and reduced noise. We are also working in the advancement of aviation by improving the system, the safety, and the efficiency of existing aircraft technology. One of those examples is the X-59 Quest, a single-pilot experimental aircraft designed to prove that its unique airframe shape can reduce the sonic boom to a quarter thumb. The X-59 is currently under construction at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works in California and will embark on its first test flight in 2022. The community flights will test in 2023 to get a sense of public perception, and NASA will compile the flight and community data for regulators' review by 2026. That is one of the biggest challenges for supersonic is that sonic boom. So we're looking at technologies to reduce that sonic boom and also do the test to make sure that we prove it has reduced that sonic boom. So that would be a game changer for future transcontinental and intercontinental transportation concepts. NASA is also leading the nation to quickly open a new era of air travel called urban air mobility, or UAM. And our vision of UAM is to have a safe and efficient air transportation system where everything from small package delivery drones to passenger carrying air taxis operate above populated area. Can you go to slide number 4? Now I will talk about a little more about what it means working with NASA, some example of some of the technologies that we have transferred for the benefit of all. At NASA, we pride ourselves on solving some of the most difficult challenges humans have ever faced. Through our history, NASA innovators have produced some of the most revolutionary technologies we have seen. And on average, our engineers and researchers create more than 1,000 new technologies every day, including with some of the revolutionary potential. One example of how Glenn works with industry is in supporting the agency's priorities in aeronautics while driving increased safety and efficiency of U.S. aircraft. And that expertise, one of them is engine icing. Our engineers develop a software that can help aircraft designers tackle aircraft icing during the design process rather than on tarmac. A software called Lewis Ice 3D is domestically distributed, is available, and is an icing modeling tool considered the most accurate tool available for predicting ice accretion. It simulates how the water droplets impact and grow in ice in flight, allowing for icing-related analysis and aircraft design, such as the placement and the extent of ice protection system to be done before it takes flight. This technology, we're using that for a product that I'm going to be talking probably in the next few charts. And you just illustrate how we can use our technologies to help industry solve some of their technical challenges. So the other activities that we have is partnership and licenses and are already available with us. And we are committed to partner with a wide variety of domestic and international partners to successfully accomplish our mission, including the Artemis program and future aeronautics initiatives. Our commercial licenses allow companies to make and sell the product based on NASA technology. And the government use license promote the use of NASA-developed concepts as companies fulfill agreements with government entities. We also have a space art agreement that provide the authority for NASA to enter agreements with other entities to advance our mission and program objectives. To this agreement, we allow access to our world-class unique testing facility and manufacturing capabilities and engagement of our experts. One example of that is the activities that we have with GE. And as you can expect, our wind tunnels are, heavily utilized by industry, all the way from subsonic to our hypersonic capabilities within NASA Glenn. We also have the NASA Small Business Innovation Reserve, SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer, STTR, program, and that have awarded more than $3.75 billion to research-intensive American small business. We also have our software usage agreement that allow U.S. entities and citizens access to the NASA-developed software, and currently NASA is offering hundreds of free software programs and codes, and they can be accessed with an agreement and no charge to the customers. Can you get to the next slide? So one of the examples you see in that chart is the whole thruster. So one of our goals right now is to return to the moon, first woman on the moon by 2024 and the next man. And we are dedicated to see America return to the moon. So that calls for an accelerated mission to the moon, and the call of that, or the name of that program, is Artemis. And we will need the support of our international commercial partners if we are to be successful. So an example of collaboration around the space exploration include the commercialization, and not just the commercialization of the activities, but it also improves the competitiveness in the global as we look into different markets. I mentioned at the beginning that Glenn has the expertise in solar electric propulsion for space exploration, and this low power, high throughput system dramatically increase the capability of spacecraft, and the advanced design result in game-changing thrust performance. In other words, it allows us to go into deep space. Could you get to the next chart, slide number 6? So one of the technologies that I mentioned was icing. So one of the things that we're doing currently, we are also transferring our technologies and looking how we can help with the COVID-19 pandemic. So several years ago, in 2015, we were working with a company through a program called the Regional Economic Developmental Program at that point in time. We created a partnership with Kent-based Emergency Products and Research, or EPR Plus R, and they were looking into how to develop a sterilization system that had to be fast and left no residue or risk the recontamination. So what we did is we joined effort with them, and we helped them using our engineers to guide the development and the production of the small, portable, and economical device that decontaminates spaces in just under an hour at a fraction of the cost of the system that were currently used. The commercially available system is called the AmbuStat, and it has widely used in pre-hospital environment like ambulance and police cars. Since the original came out, EPR has been recognized. The value is not only in sterilizing surfaces, but also addressing small viral or bacterial particles that float in the air. So that's where we come out now. So we just signed another space agreement with them, and today we're working with them to conduct additional research and testing to maximize the effectiveness of the next generation AmbuStat device called AmbuStat G2 to combat COVID-19 in hospital, ambulance, work areas, etc. The technology that we're using is, the droplets. So what we learned in the icing and how we, the research that we do in that area, the models and everything is what we are applying to help them develop techniques and strategies to be more efficient in how they deploy the sanitizer they're using in their machine. So my last slide number 7. So as you can see from, here from my talk, that NASA has a legacy on exploration, research, and technology that has yielded countless innovations that provide direct impact and improve our quality of life on Earth. Thank you for allowing me to tell you more about NASA Glenn. and how we continue to work with industry to ensure our technologies are for the benefit of all. Thank you. So now I would like to introduce Mr. Paul Solinsky, the Director of the Technology Partnerships Office at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and he is the former chair of the Federal Laboratory Consortium for Technology Transfer. Prior to joining NEST, Paul worked at the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, and in the private industry. He also has served as a commissioned officer in the U.S. Army and holds master's degrees in engineering and business administration. Please welcome Paul.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here today and talk to you. As I said, my name is Paul Solinsky. I'm with the Federal Laboratory Consortium for Technology Transfer, and I serve as the executive director of that group. And I'm really looking forward to trying to share some of these opportunities of how you can work with federal laboratories. So great presentation from Marla regarding what is going on over at NASA Glenn. But I want to really broaden this out to what's going on really nationwide and how you might take advantage of all these different opportunities. I have to tell you, I'm originally from Cleveland, and I'm very excited about trying to help the people out in Cleveland and trying to see if we can get some economic advancement and really try to develop the companies there. So if we can move to the next slide, please. So what is the FLC, Federal Laboratory Consortium for Technology Transfer? As you just heard from Marla, NASA Glenn is one of really over 300 federal laboratories that are located really all across the country, across 14 different agencies, all sorts of different activities that are going on, really that's all supported by your tax dollars. And I'll show you a little bit more about how much of those dollars are going into this activity. But it's really about trying to take research out of these programs and put it out into the marketplace. It's all about economic development. It's about really moving forward the mission of the agencies, all of those things put together. So we can do part of that from our side. We really need to work with you, and that really completes the equation. So let's move to the next slide, please. So we're going to back up one there. So when I talk about technology transfer, what is it that I'm really talking about? It's used in a lot of different ways, but in this case, technology transfer really is what we're talking about is how we transition knowledge, facilities, capabilities that are funded by your tax dollars, federal R&D funding, and trying to put it into public and private needs and for public and private good. So as Marla was talking about, NASA Glenn, there's a host of facilities and specialized equipment that are there. There's lots of unique capabilities. We have nationwide in the neighborhood of about 100,000 scientists and engineers working at federal laboratories with expertise in practically every area that you can imagine. So how do you really take advantage of that? We have unique facilities and capabilities at our laboratories that maybe your company could use in order to advance your products and services. And I really want to get across to you how excited we are about trying to work with you to advance your business. That's actually part of our mission. It's a consortium of all the different laboratories put together that are really put together to try to get this out to you. You are our primary customer working with your businesses, and I'll get a little bit more into why that is the case. So let's go to the next slide, please. So a couple big areas for the Federal Lab Consortium. We really look at it as three of what we call our main pillars: promote, educate, facilitate. Promote basically is making sure people know what we're doing, the fact that we even exist, making sure that there's awareness. Really what I'm doing today, trying to talk to you to make sure that you understand that we're here. Making sure that people understand how valuable it is in order to have this R&D funding that they have at all these different laboratories reach the public sector, make sure there's some appreciation for how this process works. We also provide the education that actually supports people that do exactly that at the federal laboratories, educate them on how to do technology transfer, what are best practices, and try to make sure that everybody in the federal laboratory system understands and can actually execute on this, really so that we can facilitate the work with you. And of course, like I just said, facilitate is really one of our main missions. Facilitation in our case really means making sure that we can get these deals out there. How do we actually connect the laboratories to businesses to try to get things done? And that's really the key to everything that we're talking about. So if we move to the next slide, please. When I talk about research and development, now these are some older numbers from 2016, but it's a lot of money. So when you look at this one shows basically $115 billion of your tax dollars going into research and development. Usually when we talk about this, is we really use the number really of about $150 billion that go into research and development funded by the federal government every year across federal agencies and laboratories. You get a rough breakdown of where that money is from this chart, as well as the darker portion is what we call internal or intramural research versus money that goes out in terms of grants. But there's a lot of money that's in this game, and really the idea though is to tap into what you do. You can see also here a number of different agencies, and of course we cover the span of almost anything from, as you know, NASA is a great example, but also defense, agriculture, where I work, for example, at the Environmental Protection Agency, the Department of Energy, the Department of Interior, really anything that you can think of, we've pretty much got something that's going in these different areas. If we move ahead to the next slide. And so why is this technology transfer so important? And I think you really got to get back and think about in the most basic terms. When I talk about spending $150 billion annually, you have to come to the realization that the government generally doesn't make stuff. And that's the key. So we can invent it, we can work on it in the laboratory, but by and large, the only way for us to get these technologies, for all these products, services, any economic advancement, to reach the people in the country is actually working with businesses. We're not going to make the products. We are not the competition for private industry. We can enhance your business, and in fact, our mission is your mission. We want to see you succeed. If you can get these technologies, if we can advance your business and your technologies and try to get them into the marketplace, we all win. And that is, in a nutshell, everything that's so important about technology transfer. It is the way that this investment in research and development reaches private marketplaces. In fact, even so much so that it's how we buy stuff back. Now, if you think about something, and I'll use the example of a fighter plane, we don't make those things. The government doesn't produce a fighter plane. We buy them. We buy them from companies. So we have to transition our technologies over to a company. They can make and distribute and sell those products, even if we're the people that are the consumer or the folks that are going to buy through our acquisition processes. Now, interesting enough, one of the things we're not talking about in technology transfer is the acquisition process. Whole different process, and we'll talk a little bit about that. In fact, Sean, who's coming up, has a lead role in doing some of that at one of the laboratories. But that's a little different than what I'm talking about, which is buying those products. We're actually trying to help make and sell those products from you, but we're not, in this case, we're not actually talking about how we purchase things. So let's move on a little bit more. So when you think about this technology transfer mission, it's a matter of really meeting mission agency mission. Let me rephrase that. So if you think about, for example, NASA, obviously Marla just talked about how they're going to try to reach the moon. What are all those technologies that come along in order to get that to happen? That's where they're going to focus their research mission. If you think about the military, obviously supporting the warfighter is everything. When you think about things like medical, health and human services, we have the National Institute of Health, the CDC, all these institutes you're thinking about in the current crisis with COVID-19, they have a mission of supporting, your health. Department of Energy, we can look at alternative energy sources. Lots of different missions out there. Aerospace research, both NASA, but you can also look at the US Air Force, for example. So we really cut across all sorts of different mission areas. Like I mentioned, Department of Agriculture, for example, the food that you eat. All of these things are what we're trying to get into the marketplace. And again, we are only successful if we find somebody that's going to actually make and sell that product. Or else it just basically sits there. It's nice to produce a paper. It does advance science. But the way to reach the business application of it is through working with a partner. And so to that end, if we move to the next slide. There's lots of different ways that we can work with you. And so when we talk about different mechanisms, and apparently this is going to take a little bit of a click through to come through the different things. So why don't we just go ahead and pull those up? Okay, there we go. So we do a lot of different activities. One of the things that we can do are actually these cooperative research and development agreements. We can actively partner with you. Again, the laboratory is going to be focusing on what the mission is, but at the same time, they want to work with you in order to develop that product. So we can work cooperatively in a public-private partnership in order to really get something that's going to take these ideas out of the laboratory and put them into the marketplace. We can do licensing agreements, as it was already mentioned. We invent stuff, so we can invent it, we can patent it, we can license it back out. We can work with partners to actually deliver those products. So really, you can just look at some of these technologies. They're not exactly off the shelf in a lot of cases because there's some earlier stage research, and we're looking to find somebody that's actually going to put some investment into it to bring it to bear in the marketplace. But there's lots of opportunities. We do quite a bit of licensing activity each year. Honestly, we don't do as much as a private company does because we're looking very carefully at where it is we can define that patent as something that's a business opportunity and something that we can transition through that process. So I'll get a little bit in where you find these types of activities, but licensing is something that we do. Facility use is a great activity that we have. Like I say, we have plenty of very unique facilities, things that might help your business get started and to grow. Basically, instead of investing a ton of money and you're buying something, you can come and use our facilities oftentimes. And maybe it is something that you just needed to do, maybe once. Maybe you have to take a unique measurement. Laboratory where I actually used to work was over at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, for example. We had a user facility for nanotechnology. It was set up entirely to be a user facility. And the interesting thing is that we're not allowed to make a profit. So we actually have to try to run it at cost. We're not allowed to make money. We don't compete with the private sector as a federal laboratory. So it's really there for your use. Again, if you look at that organization, did measurement science. Well, where do you use measurements? You measure everything. So it might not be exactly where you think, and I'll give to a couple examples here in a minute. We have lots of different types of partnership agreements that we do. We have educational partnerships, we have technology partnerships, we have collaborative partnerships of all types of shapes and sizes, material transfer agreements, all these different things. But we can also provide just technical assistance and consulting. Basically, if you have a question, we might have somebody that has an answer. And that's something that's often overlooked by a lot of people. These are resources that, again, are from your federal government that are available to you. And we have a great network to try to get you in touch with somebody, even if it's just to answer a basic question. Let's go ahead and move on. So lots of informal activities as well as formal activities. So just a couple examples of some things, just to throw some ideas out there. So this one's an interesting case because last checked, I know, is something like $15 billion worldwide what was sold for this particular heart stent. Now, what I find particularly interesting about this one is actually the partner with it was the National Energy Technology Laboratory, which is in Pittsburgh and Morgantown, West Virginia. They're a fossil energy laboratory. They don't do health research. This is a non-corrosive coating that they put onto this thing that was based on some of the work they were doing in the laboratory. So and again, this one's actually kind of an old slide where it talks about 2012 with 3 billion. Like I said, I know it's over 15 billion at the moment sold worldwide. It's sold all over the world. It's a great heart stent. And part of the laboratory's contribution was actually to get the coating that's on this heart stent in order to make it more useful in the application as opposed to designing the whole thing. And so keep that in mind. It's not something where we necessarily have to design the entire thing and you just license it as is. We might just be able to help improve your product. Sort of a bigger example on the next slide, if we can move on, is something everybody is pretty familiar with at this point, which is Siri. So Siri is an interesting thing. It came out of DARPA, and everybody's heard of DARPA as sort of the black ops, if you will, for the Pentagon. But they actually come up with a lot of different technologies because they're advanced research programs, and so they're looking ahead. Well, Siri basically was an information overload system. Too much information coming into the system. How do you manage all that data and work with all of it? So basically, somebody licensed it out and it became Siri. So you can just ask the question, hey Siri, I need help with something. And it actually is a way to access and maneuver data so that it's more usable by someone, for example, on our wonderful smartphones. Much bigger example, but there's lots of little examples. One of the ones I like the best, actually, and I don't have a slide for this one, is actually apple dippers. So the Department of Agriculture actually had an invention of how to keep apples nice, fresh, and crisp. And if you think about a kid getting a Happy Meal, and if it's an old soggy looking nasty apple, nobody's going to eat that. But having a nice crisp apple, for example, now all of a sudden we have a product that somebody can use. So I love that example just because it's so down to earth and everybody can understand something like that, which is just, a simple improvement, but it makes a huge difference in the marketability of that product. So let's move on. So how do we do this? Who carries out this Federal Lab Consortium mission? Really, it's a matter of really involving all of the federal laboratories. We have a great network. In fact, one of our biggest strengths is our network. In a lot of ways, of course, government can be very confusing. We set up our mission across all the different mission spaces and across all the different agencies and laboratories. And how do you maneuver around all that? It can be actually a rather daunting task. One of the nice things that we have actually is a wonderful networking opportunity where we can try to reach across all of these different agencies and programs as a bit of a one-stop shop and actually help people navigate through this. We actually do have 6 regions. You can already see here from the slide, basically we have one that's in the Midwest. They're actually more down to earth and can help you on the spot. And so it's a really active program. We're there to help. We're set up actually to help and try to make these basic introductions between laboratories and partners. Our job isn't to actually get in the way. It's actually just to make that introduction, get out of the way. Hopefully you can go ahead and work with those laboratories then directly. So we have a great system. Hopefully we can help you find something. Let's move on. And so in addition to some of these like in-person types of things, which are, great, and hopefully we can pull up the rest of this slide here as well. We have a great website. I think it's a very active thing. As I already mentioned, we do these promote, educate, facilitate. We're there for you. And we have a couple key things on our website that you can find that I just want to introduce you to, a couple things that maybe you can think about. And so let's move on. So first and foremost, as I said, with this mission, we can pull up the rest of the text there. We have things, for example, like success stories, awards programs, our news and media outlets, what we do on social media. In some respects, some of this might seem a little bit crazy, like, well, okay, success stories, that's nice. Part of the reason to have it there, of course, is also to give you ideas of what others have done, so that maybe you can think about how we might help you. Maybe you don't read it in great detail, but it might hopefully give you some ideas of how you might work with the federal laboratory. We also put out things, for example, like the awards. You can see examples. And that's one of the more useful parts about this, is trying to get you thinking about how you might connect with the federal laboratory. What benefit can we bring to you? And then, of course, we try to do a lot of different media types of outreach to make information available. So let's keep moving. If you really want to learn more about technology transfer and how it works, as I said, we actually provide the training for people that work in technology transfer. And so we have a very extensive piece on there in our learning center on the website, a lot of more information for technology transfer professionals as opposed to everybody that's out there, but it's certainly up there if you'd like to learn more. And I would invite you to go ahead and check that out. Maybe that'll give you some ideas as well of how you make this thing work. And let's keep moving. And of course, what I'm here really to talk to you today about is facilitate. How do you get things done? Now we have what we call our toolkit. We have a number of different mechanisms and things that are up there on the website in order to help you get through this mission. So first of all, we have our mechanisms. And again, I put up a short list before of different mechanisms. It's a little bit interesting that different agencies have different authorities. Congress occasionally gives some unique authorities to some agencies. We try to summarize the different types of mechanisms that are available by agency in this mechanisms database that we have online. We have our locator service. And again, this is just putting into the network what's available. Just really actively, it's very old school, if you will, but just asking a question and having us help you. We have a playbook to put out there of best practices so agencies can learn from each other. Really, one of our biggest tools is this FLC Business tool. What's nice about FLC Business is actually this is our online search tool. So you should be able to search across what are the laboratories, like what laboratories are in Ohio, what laboratories are nearby. You can put in those types of things and actually get results of what are the laboratories that are nearby, what are the technologies, for example, that are available for license from those laboratories, a little bit more information about maybe some of the equipment and unique facilities at those laboratories. So that's all available through this FLC Business tool. It's a searchable database. It is continually under improvement. So hopefully if you don't find what you want, again, we can help you with that through our locator service. Just hit that contact us button and we can go ahead and try to do that through, like I said, just working with you directly. And it's kind of come up there. So just, looking at the process, again, just sort of walking through, what do you need? And that's usually the best place to start. Really, what are you trying to accomplish? And we can help you get there, working through the different things about looking at what's available from the laboratories, what kind of processes that we can have. Really, at the end of the day, we're going to try to work with you to come up with something that's going to work for you. That's our goal. We need you. We need to work with you in order to accomplish the mission of the laboratories themselves, which is actually to get goods and services out there in the public. So I would invite you, please take a look at what we've got, connect with us. We'd like to try to work with you, and I look forward to hopefully working with a lot of you in the future. So that's my presentation. And what I'd like to do next is I introduce our next speakers, Brooke and Sean. Brooke Pine is the director of the Strategic and Spectrum Missions Advanced Resilient Trusted Systems Program, SMARTS, where she works with government, industry, and academia to foster collaborative opportunities and enable innovative partnerships. Brooke comes to this position with extensive experience working for the Department of Defense and other agencies. She has expert knowledge of federal programs, including the Small Business Innovation Research Program, great program if you've never used it. And as I just mentioned, the federal technology transfer community, where I'm proud to have worked with her previously. Also joining us, Sean Davis is the business operations lead for the Strategic Microelectronics Division at the Naval Surface Warfare Center Crane Division in Indiana, where he delivers business processes for consistent and efficient financial management, logistics, and acquisition. Sean also serves as the co-lead for the SMARTS program and other transaction authority agreements, which you'll hear all about in the next presentation. In addition, he provides training to government employees on other transaction authorities for prototyping requirements. He comes to this position with a wealth of background in federal financial and business programs. And I'd like to welcome Brooke and Sean. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and start off. I also wanted to add, we have Brian Smith on the line as well. He's been an integral part of this program management team for SMARTS on the government side as well. So just wanted to give him a short introduction. He actually also serves as the task manager for the OSD Trusted and Assured Microelectronics program for the work that we do at Crane. And again, he's been a integral member of this program management team and has helped us out tremendously. So just wanted to recognize him as well before we started. So if you want to go ahead and jump to our next slide there, where we have the OTA benefits and objectives. Couple things here. So there's a few reasons we really wanted to get involved in the OTA world. One, keeping pace with technology. So as you know, a lot of these new startups and small businesses out there may have emerging technology that we have never seen before. We've never had access to. Part of that could be because they just don't have the ability to compete on a lot of FAR-based contracts. They don't have the resources. And so this OTA environment allows them to get involved in a way that's more like how the commercial world works. Speed of acquisition is key as well. In the OTA environment, we're actually able to move a lot faster. So we don't have a lot of the steps in place and a lot of the requirements that come along with FAR-based contracts. And this allows us to be a little bit more flexible in working with these small businesses and non-traditionals when it comes to negotiations. It allows us to move at a faster pace. So it really speeds up the process and allows us to get it helps us get money to those small businesses, those startups that are performing much faster. So it helps them out, but it also helps us out by enabling us to move a little bit faster. Just to kind of give you an idea, on average, we are, from the time we release request for solutions to the time we award an agreement, around 90 to 100 days on average. And in comparison with a FAR-based contract, you may be looking 9 to 12 months, maybe in some cases longer. So very, very fast in comparison. So it's been tremendous in helping us move quickly. And then the other piece there is the diversification of sources. Again, I mentioned non-traditional. So, it gives us access to some of these companies that maybe don't have the money, the time, the people, the resources to participate on a FAR-based contract. So it allows us a broader reach to small business, again, like I said, non-traditional defense contractors, academic institutions, and also allows for teaming arrangements amongst those companies. And in addition to that, some of your traditional defense contractors that we're used to working with can also be involved in these projects as well. And I'll get into how the participation piece of that works here in a few minutes. But again, it just gives us that broader outreach and more opportunities to reach some of those companies that we can't reach on a FAR-based contract. Next slide, please. So this right here, SMARTS operates on the 10 U.S.C. 2371B authority. That's the U.S. code, and it's for prototyping. And there's three pieces to this. In order for us to do a prototype project, you have to meet the purpose of that's documented in the NDAA language, which basically says that you're directly enhancing the mission effectiveness of military personnel. You can read the full definition there on the slide, but pretty much anything that we do at NSWC Crane, we're working for the DoD. So anything that we develop is going to have some purpose and to enhance our mission effectiveness. And so that's the key for the purpose piece. Now, if you go on to the prototype definition, it's very, very broad. It's probably not what most of you think of when you think of a prototype. It's not necessarily something that's tangible that you can see or that you can hold. It can be a number of different things. It could be systems, subsystems, components, a methodology, technology or processes, business processes. So I'm not going to go through that entire definition, but if you look there, you can see that there's a lot of different things that fall into that. Even obsolescence, reverse engineering to address obsolescence, novel application of commercial technologies for defense purposes, things of that nature. So it's actually much broader than you might expect. This full definition can also be found in the OSD Other Transactions Guide. It's dated from November 2018. If you Google it, you can find it online, but gives you a lot of detail about these items here. The third piece of that is participation. So there's four ways that you can meet the participation requirement, and they're all listed here. So number one, if you have at least one non-traditional defense contractor or nonprofit research institution participating to a significant extent in the prototype project. So at least one non-traditional. So this is where I was talking about if you have a large traditional defense contractor, if they team with a non-traditional defense contractor that's providing a significant extent of the prototype development work, then they meet this qualification. So before I move on to the second one here, so there's a couple things that I'll get into. One is what's the definition of a non-traditional defense contractor? That's actually coming up on another slide, so I'll leave that one for now. Significant extent is really open to interpretation. There's no dollar value or percentage of funds tied to that. So the thing you got to remember is, is that non-traditional defense contractor providing something that is key to the overall development of the project? And one example I give sometimes, if you have say you have a large prime that is awarded this project and they're developing a big DoD system, but they reach out to this non-traditional defense contractor that has some key piece of software that no one else develops in the whole world, and they need this for this large system to work. And maybe it's a tiny percentage of the actual funds that go to this project, but without that piece of software, that system cannot work. So in that instance, that's significant extent because it's required for that actual prototype to be successful. So main thing is it just has to be something that's key for the success of that prototype. The second way to qualify is all of the participants in the transaction are small business or non-traditional defense contractors. So 1 and 2 are very similar. If you have one or all non-traditional defense contractors or small businesses, you qualify. The third way that you can qualify for participation is, say you have a large prime that doesn't want to team with a non-traditional defense contractor. They can do that as long as at least 1/3 of the total cost of the prototype project is to be paid for by funds provided from sources other than the federal government. So an example of when that might occur is, say you have a company that's developing something that has use in the defense sector, but also has use in the commercial sector. So they may be interested in partially funding the development of that project with their own R&D dollars because they have a commercial application for it as well. And in that instance, that's totally fine. They wouldn't necessarily have to team up with a non-traditional defense contractor. But if that's the case, then they would be responsible for at least 1/3 of the total cost. Another option would be to get third-party funding from, say, there's the possibility of venture capitalists that are interested in growing a technology. So third-party funding is an option as well. If you can't meet any of those first three, the fourth option is to go to the senior procurement executive for the agency. And in that case, we've never had to go there, but in that case, you have to go pretty high up the chain and get authorization and signatures in order to move forward. And there may be certain circumstances where that's expected because of the complexity or because of the classification level of the project, or maybe because there's already been significant investment in something and it makes sense to go to that level and move forward. So I don't really see any of those, but generally we have no issue with finding someone that has a non-traditional that they can at least team or partner with. So those are the 4 ways. Just need to meet one of those, not all of them. So if we go on to the next slide. So here I have the definition of a non-traditional defense contractor, and it's probably not what you would expect. You would normally think of a defense contractor as someone who primarily does defense contracting work, but there are some things associated with that may determine whether or not that particular vendor is a traditional or a non-traditional. So right here is the definition right out of the OSD guide. It says an entity that is not currently performing and has not performed for at least the 1-year period preceding the solicitation of sources by DoD for the procurement or transaction, any contract or subcontract for the DoD that is subject to full coverage under cost accounting standards prescribed pursuant to Section 1502 of Title 41 and the regulations implementing such section. So what that means basically is in a prior 12 months, if you were subject to full cost accounting standards prescribed under that Section 1502, then you would be considered a traditional defense contractor. If you have performed less than $50 million in CAS meaning cost accounting standards covered efforts during the preceding cost accounting period, you are actually considered a non-traditional. So a lot of those defense contractors out there that are small business that only do defense contracting, if they have performed less than $50 million in cost accounting standards covered efforts, they are considered a non-traditional. And there's some other bullets there below. Small businesses that are exempt from CAS requirements are considered non-traditional. If you primarily perform contracts under commercial procedures, exclusively perform under firm fixed price contracts with adequate price competition, those are other things that might cause you to fall into that non-traditional defense contractor definition. Next slide. So this next slide here, OTs allow for follow-on production. There's a couple of things that need to be met in order for that to take place. This slide here, again, is straight from the OSD guide, the verbiage here. So the main thing is whenever you go out with a solicitation for a prototype, you need to mention in that solicitation that you expect or anticipate that there could be follow-on production. If you do that and the prototype was successfully completed, meaning that it met whatever success criteria that you laid out in that request for solutions, then you may go on to a follow-on production OT or a FAR-based contract without having to recompete for the production piece. So again, as long as you notified everyone in your request for solutions up front that there's the possibility of going into production and you successfully complete the prototype, you may award follow-on production OT without recompeting. And at this point, I will hand it over to Brooke to talk through some of the NSTXL material.
Thanks, Sean. So we kind of broke this brief up into a couple of components. So that first being, kind of like OTA 101, what is it? What's the definitions? What is a non-traditional? That is a question we get very, very often. So we kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of context in that kind of vein. And now we're going to move on talking to a little bit about NSTXL, which is the company where I work. And then we'll move on and talk about the SMARTS OTA vehicle. So NSTXL is the company that actually manages the SMARTS OTA. They actually have multiple OTAs. Another one is out of the Army. It's actually called T-Rex. It is in Orlando. SMARTS is out of the Navy. It is here in Southern Indiana. But NSTXL is kind of the parent company that develops kind of philosophies and the consortium around and then executes into each one of those OTAs and any OTA that they might gain or win down the road as well. So give you a little bit of background about NSTXL. So it was created several years back, and really the true intent and focus was all about the warfighter and about how can we get innovative technology solutions and how can we get the state of the art to the warfighter in a rapid and accelerated pace. So that actually, with being 17 years civilian Navy, that actually spoke to my heart, which is one of the reasons why I came over to be the director of this vehicle. And that still holds true today. I mean, that has not lost its focus over the last several years as the company has grown and as multiple OTAs have been added underneath the NSTXL umbrella. A couple of things that I want to mention here about NSTXL. So it is a nonprofit organization. We have an open source network model, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a few slides. We're really the first DoD-wide OTA that was created a while back. And another thing that's really, really unique, and one of the philosophy points that really kind of sold me on this NSTXL model when I jumped from the federal government over, is that when you see an opportunity from NSTXL, whether it is SMARTS or T-Rex, that opportunity has funding already allocated. So you're not pursuing anything that's hollow, which for small businesses and non-traditionals becomes very critical. Resources can be an issue, and knowing that there are funded opportunities that you can pursue, we're seeing a drive of those quality non-traditionals within the defense sector driving towards these OTAs for part of that philosophy. Another thing that we're kind of known for in our methodologies is the scouting and vetting of technologies and companies that align to active warfighter needs and requirements, that align to the scope of the OTAs that NSTXL manages, SMARTS being one of those. So for us, it really becomes about creating a government-ready community of performers, whether that be primes, whether that be small businesses, whether that be non-traditional. So naturally, they got to meet the criteria set that Sean mentioned in the previous slides. But it's really about bringing the community together in the areas within the scope and having them communicate, team, collaborate, so that when opportunities get vetted and come through any of the vehicles, that they're primed and ready and that they can go and execute in a rapid pace. So the other thing is this mentoring of non-traditionals. So this becomes kind of critical whenever you're trying to, if you're a non-traditionalist trying to break into the defense contracting game and defense workload. And what makes it unique is that we're a non-traditional. So we can help people walk that path, the same path that we had to walk to get to where we are today. And so that is something that's really kind of unique to the NSTXL model that I think provides a unique experience for those community members and those entities within the consortium and within the NSTXL community. Next slide, please. So this is just a real quick graphic in reference to how that community structure kind of works. Again, NSWC Crane is the home of SMARTS, but they're not the only user of SMARTS. So again, SMARTS is created as this prototyping rapid vehicle that anyone within the DoD can come in and utilize as long as it's within those scope areas. So we'll cover those scope areas here in a few slides, but it's really important for everybody to kind of understand that we do have external customers utilizing the vehicle now. Crane naturally utilizes it as well, but that is an opportunity to pull together from all of the DoD agencies and pull in prototyping projects and opportunities through this type of vehicle for the rapid acquisition concept. Again, NSTXL serves as that middle hub, kind of that translator, kind of that broker, and that consortium manager role. And one thing that I'll add here is that our consortium is at that level. It's not broke between individual OTAs that we have, because you see the box underneath that, it talks about the SMARTS Consortium, and I mentioned T-REX, which is another OTA that we have. Reality is all those entities we're trying to pull together as a whole in that upper consortium, and then SMARTS and T-REX and any OTA that we have plays within that consortium, pulls out the appropriate members that align to the opportunities in that OTA. We have members that align to all of our OTAs that we have, which is fantastic for them because the opportunities are all over the place for them. So it's not just the SMARTS Consortium, it's actually a higher level, and you kind of get a little bit more because you get the broadness of all of the OTAs that NSTXL is actively managing and executing, not just the SMARTS OTA. So next slide, please. So the next few slides, we're going to jump into the SMARTS overview. So this is where we're going to deep dive the SMARTS OTA, what it is and what it's about. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it back over to Sean.
Thanks, Brooke. So this next slide here, we've really already hit on some of these things, but again, state-of-the-art technologies is what we're after. So that's the big reason for being able to go after those non-traditionals and small businesses that have technology that we're not used to seeing in the DoD environment, that maybe some of these larger defense contractors are the ones that typically bid on our FAR-based contracts, but giving access to these smaller companies that again, maybe don't have the resources to do the FAR-based contract, and giving them the ability to interact with the government as well as other innovators and industry to help develop newer technologies. But the second piece there, agile and collaborative working relationship. So NSTXL is a key piece of that. Brooke and her team have been especially helpful in, one, growing a consortium with companies that fit the technology areas and the scope of our OTA, as well as academic institutions, labs, and so forth. So being able to bring all of those entities together and potentially collaborate and provide teaming arrangements in certain situations gives us better access to technology. Consortium, like I said, it's comprised of a number of different entities. And one of the cool things that NSCXL does, and they have a platform for their members that allow them to interact. So whenever they have an opportunity, when we have an opportunity that's coming soon, they can start kind of generating a buzz with their consortium. The consortium members can start reaching out to each other if they think maybe they have a partial solution, and they can start engaging other members within that consortium to team together to provide a full solution and provide or present a proposal that will give us a full solution. That's one of the great things that I think that they offer, just being able to bring companies together or academic institutions together and provide a full solution. So next slide. So here's the team. So again, you've heard from Brooke. She's the SMARTS director. Ian Skeet is the principal of acquisition. Ian actually comes from ACC Orlando, and I believe he had about 13 years of experience as a contracting officer for the Army. So has a lot of government contracting experience. Has been tremendous in helping us out as well. And then you have Janae Mills, who is an acquisition specialist, and she has been a big help in developing some of our documents. So we have a document that's called a prototype acquisition approach, which is where we first start to identify our needs and try to help write the requirement that will eventually turn into a request for solutions, which she also helps to write so that we can get those out to industry. And then Travis Hayes is a senior advisor. He works there in the office with Brooke outside of NSWC Crane. It's been a big help with engagement and reaching out to other government entities when there are requirements that in some cases want to use these entities want to use the SMARTS vehicle. So we try to find connections within Crane and our technical community, and ensure that we can find ties to our scope and kind of help them draft that requirement. On the NSWC Crane side, you have myself and Brian, which you've heard from me, and I mentioned Brian earlier. Dallas Parsley is our agreements officer. He's our primary agreements officer. He's been involved in many of our projects here in the first year. Actually, we've been up and running for about a year and a half, and Dallas has been engaged for most of that time. But great guy to work with. Seems to really understand the agreement side outside of the FAR-based world, and extremely nice guy. Has been great to work with, and will generally serve as the agreements officer for the majority of the contracts that are awarded on SMARTS. Next slide. So here are many of the technology areas that are in the scope, within the scope of SMARTS. So, SMARTS stands for Strategic and Spectrum Missions Advanced Resilient Trusted Systems. So within that, strategic missions, for those of you who don't know, generally stands for nuclear deterrence. So we have a lot of strategic types of terms in here. Within strategic, we have trusted microelectronics, and the reason for that is, obviously some of these microelectronics have to last for long periods of time without failure. They have to stand up to radiation without failure. So that's where the trusted microelectronics component comes in. And then we also have spectrum missions, which deals with RF technologies, optoelectronic technologies. So again, these are a lot of the technology areas that fall within the scope that you see on this slide. Things like verification and validation, radiation hardening by process or by design, outreach and standards, design assurance, things of that nature. So I won't go through every single one of these, but these are some of the main technology areas within the scope. On the next slide, we actually have the broader definition of strategic missions and spectrum missions. So if so this is really the main piece of this. So you really, if we have a project that we want to do on SMARTS, it has to fit within one of these two definitions. The previous slide was the technology areas within these, but really it needs to fit within these definitions for it to be considered within scope on SMARTS. So again, primarily we're dealing with strategic missions, which is, like I said, is nuclear deterrence and things of that nature, spectrum warfare technologies. So that may not necessarily cover everything within the DoD, obviously, but generally, if you can find a fit within one of these definitions, we can generally move forward on the SMARTS OTA. Next slide. So these are some of the big benefits of SMARTS. One, we have the ability to incrementally fund. So what that means is we can fund throughout performance of the prototype project. And what we do is we generally have, whenever a vendor proposes, we actually have them propose a milestone schedule. And that milestone could be different stages of development. It could be different intervals within the development of the prototype. And once you meet that milestone, there will be a payment associated with that milestone. So generally, for example, you know, if the project was for 10 million and you had various milestones throughout the 2 years of performance, you know, you might be receiving parts of that 10 million throughout the 2 years. Nice thing about that is it allows us to fund, especially with those small businesses, allows us to fund some of that development upfront. You know, sometimes if you need startup money to get the project started, or to procure some things for the development of the prototype, we can fund that upfront, which normally doesn't happen on a FAR-based contract. So it just allows you to stay fluid and continue working without having any hangups if you're a small business. Easier collaboration among offices, hit on that quite a bit, but again, it just allows for those teaming arrangements. You actually have the ability to engage with the requiring technical authority if you're the vendor, so, or vice versa. So in those situations where you're performing, you know, you can have open dialogue, you can have interaction between the performer and the government team to make sure that, you know, everyone's on the same page. If there's questions, if there's things that need to be addressed, you can have that open dialogue. Now, with that said, you know, if there's ever a situation where you would have to change, if some recommendation is made that would cause you to have to change the scope, then you would do a contract mod, and that would have to take place before you change anything within the scope of the actual agreement. But just having that open dialogue to make sure that everyone's on the same page and just have some kind of interaction is totally fine. Easier teaming among performers, we've hit on that plenty, but again, that's one of the key benefits, just being able to reach those various entities and having them team in situations where maybe they can't provide a full solution, but they can if they team with someone. Your IP and data rights are completely flexible. You have the ability to negotiate those before an award takes place. You know, typically the government will have an idea of what data rights they're interested in, but you know, everything's open to negotiation. You can negotiate every piece of that before an award takes place. And then your quicker lead time to acquisition. So I hit on that earlier. You know, we average about 90 to 100 days, probably closer to 100 days for award once a request for solution is released. You know, there are situations where those could be shorter or longer. Our quickest award was 55 days, which is extremely fast. You could have a situation where the complexity of a particular project may cause us to leave it out on the street longer, may require a little more negotiation before an award takes place. And those kind of things can extend that award time. But generally, we're in just about 3 months. Next slide. I'm going to hand this back over to Brooke so she can talk through the SMARTS collaborative process.
Thanks, John. So a couple of things that you guys probably keep hearing: flexible, rapid, agile, collaborative. And you're probably not used to hearing that correlated to an acquisition type process with the federal government, but it's real, and it's executing, and it is performing extremely well within the environment. So, and a lot of that has to do with this collaborative process. It's really kind of been built around the SMARTS model. And I'm not going to walk through each one of these steps, but the trusted collaborative environment between NSTXL, Crane, and that federal government customer really is key for us to understand and be able to translate and articulate within the documentation and within our portal what those opportunities look like, so that we're delivering quality proposals and quality performers back to them. So everybody kind of understands, to do that you have to communicate. So that's what we do throughout this entire process. There is a true open communication back and forth with that government customer on the identification and the vetting and the documentation around each one of those opportunities. So with that said, while we are working through that process with the federal government, we are also building that consortium and building that government-ready community, so that when that opportunity gets released, that there's people ready to meet those needs and requirements, ready to execute and ready to team and provide the solution sets back to the federal government. So it really is a unique environment. I can tell you from this process, the first documentation that usually hits the street for outside external entities to see is called a coming soon announcement. That coming soon announcement is usually in front of an RFS, which is in the OTA environment, that is a request for solutions. It's usually in front of that anywhere from 3 to 4 weeks. And what we're trying to do is give everybody a heads up that, hey, this opportunity is coming. Here's a one-pager on what this opportunity is going to be. Start thinking about it, start talking to people, and in front of that RFS. And then the RFS goes out, which is a full document, a full explanation of what the problem set is, and what solutions that they're interested in receiving for that opportunity. Most of those RFSs are on the street about 30 days. That is all driven back by the federal government customer, but we do run an average of about 30 days on those. So again, you can see the coming soon, and then following that, within 3 to 4 weeks is typically the full RFS, which is where proposals can then be submitted. That RFS is typically on the street about 30 days. So that kind of gives you a window of how long that opportunity, you have visibility to that opportunity and what's within that pipeline for the SMARTS opportunities. Next slide, please. So this next slide just gets to some of the timeframes that Sean kind of already spoke to. So if you look at RFS release to award, which includes that 30-day window that I just spoke of, then award and money to the performer is roughly about 100 days. So again, it's typically very fast. The intent is to get the performer executing, get the award made, and really push that prototyping into a rapid acceleration type time frame underneath the OTA authority. Next slide, please. So we get this question a lot. So it's what do you have? What opportunities do you have? So these are 2 coming soon opportunities. So again, these are the ones that are about 3 to 4 weeks in front of the full RFS that we currently have on the street. So we have 2 of them. We have RFSD, radio frequency spectrum dominance, and we have the HWIL TAP, which is hardware in the loop, technology advanced test bed. Both of these are slated to open anytime. But this, again, you could go to our website, which is S2MARTS.org, smarts.org, and you could read the one-pager on both of these opportunities and start figuring out whether or not you would be interested in, knowing more. You wanted to put it on your calendar for when it opens. You want to be put on notifications for these opportunities so that something will drop into your email. All of those kind of things, so you can kind of start the planning process around these coming soon opportunities. So these are 2 that we currently have active. These are 2 that are currently on the street. Next page, please. So now we go into what do you have in proposal, a submission time frame. So again, request for solutions. This one is called RAMP, Rapid Assured Microelectronics Using Advanced Commercial Capabilities. And again, you got a short paragraph here, but I also provided the opportunity link on this slide because this opportunity link will send you into the whole page that has all of the documentation that correlates to this opportunity. This opportunity closes May 29th at 12 p.m. Eastern. And all the documentations that are currently out there for this opportunity include a full RFS. We also did conduct a project talks on this opportunity. Project talks is where we have live one-on-one conversation with the opportunity owner so that they can articulate kind of what they put in the RFS, and we also take live Q&A. That is recorded, and that is out on the opportunity page as well. So if you're interested in this opportunity, I highly recommend that you go back and review the project talks. And then the other thing that we have or we're working on for this opportunity is the Q&A. So every time we release an RFS, we have 1 week of Q&A submissions back into us. We give those to the federal government. They actually end up addressing some of those live during the project talks, which is why it's a feeder into project talks. Then they answer the remaining of those, and then we take more questions during the project talks live. So for this opportunity, we have a lot of questions, which is very good because it shows the increase of interest and the level of this opportunity. But you can certainly go out, review every bit of the documentation, play back the project talks, and make a determination on whether or not you're interested in pursuing this request for solutions. Next, please. So this next one is also an RFS that's currently out on the street. Now, this one closes on Monday, so your window might be really short at this point, but it is certainly an opportunity that we have out there and that we have open. Again, opportunity link is included. The documentations for this one, you have the RFS and the full Q&A that was submitted and is now fully reposted. We did not conduct a project talks on this opportunity, so there is not a project talks for this one. But again, full documentation for you to make a determination on a pursuit and whether or not you might be interested in proposing on this opportunity. And again, all of these opportunities, when you view them in this state, that means there's money already budgeted and set aside for these opportunities. Next slide, please. So I threw this slide in there last minute, mainly because you've heard me talk about consortium, you've heard me talk about open model, and I get questions on the membership. So I wanted to put this in there because the membership is really kind of a very, very unique model. Again, I already mentioned that the consortium is at NSTXL level. So if you buy into the consortium as a member, you then can leverage any and all OTAs that NSTXL has at the time that's active. So right now you would get SMARTS and T-REX, which is the Army one out of Orlando. Another really unique feature is that you do not have to be a member to view the opportunities. So all those opportunities I just showcased in the previous slides, Anybody can go review those. Anybody can see those. We market to the much broader, cast that broader net. And we do that for a couple of reasons. One is that, as you saw, the scope and the technology areas in SMARTS are very, very broad. And we could potentially not have the right members in the consortium to execute to a high quality standard any of those opportunities that the federal government is bringing forward. So we feel like we need to constantly be marketing, we need to be vetting, we need to be prospecting those entities, those academics, industries, non-traditionals that could execute within any of those 21 technology areas. So that's one reason. And another reason is, and again, I'm 17 years coming out of the federal government, but if we can't deliver a high quality performer to the federal government, then we're not doing our job. So ensuring we are building the right government ready community becomes critical to this model. So membership becomes a requirement at time of proposal. So you can get on an emailing list, you can get on a notification list, you can like us on LinkedIn. We do lots of LinkedIn campaigns. You can follow what we're doing and you can read those opportunities and you can make a business decision not to opt in to the membership until you find the one opportunity you want to pursue. So that's the first thing. The other thing, so it's kind of like the try before you buy kind of thing. Now, if you buy in, you do get benefits. So, and a couple of those are, we have a very healthy educational program for all of our consortium members that has to do with what type of things do you need to be prepared with to actually do business with the federal government, whether it be accounting, whether it be the NIST cyber requirements, whatever that might be. We have a very nice educational program that you get as being a member. And again, that gets back to government ready performers, government ready community. The other thing that you get is our teaming board. So a lot of our opportunities end in teaming arrangements of some fashion. So our teaming boards become very critical for our members to have dialogue on, hey, Brooke, I just saw that ramp opportunity and we're interested in pursuing ramp, but we bring this component. So we're interested in teaming with folks that need this component, or we're interested in identifying team members that have this, and this to ensure we have a well-rounded solution that we're going to give back to the federal government. So the teaming platforms become really key for each one of these opportunities, and they open up at coming soon. So you have that 3 to 4 weeks, and then you have that 30-day window. But that is really not a lot of time to figure out teaming arrangements and try to figure out who you're going to pull together. That's why dialogue and communication within the community becomes really key early on, and that is certainly a benefit that you will get as a member. So to become a member, it's really quick. The application is actually online, again, smarts.org. You can fill it out literally within 24 to 48 hours. You will get something back in return on your approval, and you even will get a one-on-one call with some folks at NSTXL to kind of walk you through all those benefits, the community platform, all of the different components that I just mentioned. So with that, next slide, please. And this is probably the most important slide in the entire deck, and it is contact information. How do you get a hold of Sean, Brian, or myself? Again, here you go, phone numbers, emails. We're all on LinkedIn, very active on LinkedIn. Please come connect with us. Again, smarts.org has all of the information you will need on SMARTS, and we are always here to help. So with that, I would actually ask Sean and Brian if they have any last parting comments or something they would like to articulate.
I don't have anything else to add. Brian, if you do, go ahead.
Yeah, there's just a few things that I was going to add, benefits to the NSTXL and SMARTS consortiums for small businesses and members and such. So we've touched on a lot of things, but one thing I wanted to hit on was the advance payment with NSTXL. So our agreements are actually between the government and NSTXL. It's kind of, your CM, your prime contractor. So they help you manage all of the WAF invoicing. So if folks have ever used WAF before and try to get paid on a government contract, realize how painful that can be. But what we allow on our OTA is if the milestone is due within the next 6 months, we allow NSTXL to bill the government for that and get into WAF and get paid. And then that way, when the performer meets a milestone and the government concurs that that milestone is met, they can get paid within 3 to 5 days rather than sometimes it's weeks or months before the WAF clears and the vendor can get paid. And to touch on Brooke's membership and the keys to the membership is the project talks, like she mentioned. We've had those in a lot of projects. We've had a lot of participation, and it's actually helped clarify a lot of questions from vendors and industry because they get to hear from the government SMEs on kind of what needs to be done in order to make this project successful. So it kind of gives them a benefit to that as well. And then just a couple of things I want to talk about as far as proposals. So if you write on a project, a lot of our projects are phased approaches. And in order to just increase the competition and allow for more folks to participate on the SMARTS OTA, we've done a lot of phased approaches where phase 1 has been awarded to multiple vendors. So you're not just competing, for the entire project. It allows you to, it allows your proposal to be selected for phase 1, and you actually get to prove yourself that, to the government, and not just based on your proposal, but you're competing in phase 1, and then we do down selects into phase 2, where the real prototype can be built. So it's just another example and another way for multiple awards on our projects. We've done that on a few projects where we've had multiple awardees on phase 1 and then doing a down select. And then the final benefit, I think, to writing proposals and bidding on SMARTS projects is the ability for customers to come back and government sponsors to come back 6 months or a year from now whenever they have additional funding and they want to reach back to proposals that were submitted on a request for solutions. So if you submit an RFS and you are trying to win a project, but you may not be selected for this first project, we may have a customer that comes back 6 months later and says, hey, I want to sign a non-disclosure. I want to look at these proposals. And they may like what you had to say in your proposal, and we'll reach back to you and award a contract with you. You don't have to recompete or provide a new proposal. You would just need to, evaluate your proposal, make sure the technical solution and your cost is still valid, and then a contract could be awarded to you. So those are just some of the things I wanted to really hit on and drive home to potential members or members that are already part of the consortium. But Brooke and Sean did a great job explaining what we're doing on SMARTS, and I would agree with Brooke that the most important slide is the contact slide. I would add all 3 of us to LinkedIn. We are very active on there, so you'll see a lot on LinkedIn. So that's all I had, and appreciate everybody's time.
Those are all fantastic ads, Brian. I really appreciate you jumping in there. So with that said, that is your brief from the SMARTS team.
Thank you, Brooke, and all of our presenters today. At this point in time, we'd like to open up the dialogue to a Q&A section for everyone in the audience. To ask your questions, please click on the question button in the control panel and start typing your questions there. We had a couple of questions come in during the presentation, so Howard, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of our presenters and all of our attendees today. The first question goes to Dr. Perez Davis, and this was being addressed. We're a company that has patented enabling energy storage and electric propulsion technology. We are trying to determine the best person we would contact at NASA Glenn to move that forward.
Only if you can put myself in on mute. I'm sorry. You mentioned electric propulsion. Is that the question about?
Yes, that's correct. If there was a company that has an enabling energy storage electric propulsion technology, who would be the best person that they would contact at NASA, Glenn?
All right, I'll give two names. If it's in the areas of batteries and energy storage, that name would be Eric Clark. He is the branch chief for photovoltaics and electrochemical systems. And his phone number is 216-433-3926.
Perfect. Did you say two people or did you just have that one person?
Yeah, so yeah, I just want to make sure to have the first one. So the second one, it is more in terms of propulsion systems, not necessarily energy storage. The person to call would be David Jacobson, Jacobso. He is the branch chief for electric propulsion systems, and his phone number is 216-433-3691.
Thank you very much. And I will take these questions and the answers and also include them in the briefing back to all of our attendees. The next question is for Mr. Solinsky. If we are a company that has a particular technology, we can't seem to find a federal lab on your website that we could share it with, is the best thing for us to do to contact you in regards to that?
Sure, go ahead and send me a note and I'll go ahead and see what I can do in terms of putting you in touch with the right person. There's also, by the way, on the contact button, if you hit that, you can actually submit questions like that directly.
Great. And then do you also help people through the process of negotiations and Space Act agreements and other things with the particular lab, or do you generally just hand that off to the lab?
Generally, at that point, the laboratory is going to do the negotiations themselves. We don't get in the way of that. We're really trying to connect the companies to the laboratories, and that's really our mission space.
Great, thank you very much for that. The next question goes to the Navy group. There's a lot of questions in regards to projects that people have, maybe not directly with Crane, but in other NSW areas, and that would be mostly locations. Can we still speak with you guys about what we're working on and maybe the best direction for us to take? And that's to Brooke, Sean, or Brian.
Yep. So I can answer from the SMART side, and yes, I mean, if it falls within the SMART scope, we would love to know what you're working on, who you're working on it with, where you have that customer alignment, and where you are within the life cycle of that project. So from my vantage point, yes.
Yeah, this is Sean. I would agree. Generally, if it fits within the scope of SMARTS, we'd definitely like to hear about it if you have a project that you're interested in using the vehicle for. Again, main thing that we have to do up front is just make sure that we can find alignment within the scope, and if we can do that, we can start working the process and working towards drafting the requirement and trying to move the project forward. So yes.
That's great. That really sums up the questions that we have that are listed on the webinar right now. Let me extend a heartwarming thanks to all of our presenters and our attendees from the Greater Cleveland Partnership and all of our partners. We really appreciate this opportunity of bringing the information out to our members, and again, all of our other company partners, so they can access this just unbelievable wealth of just expertise and capabilities that are out there. I am going to try and conduct our next session with the AFRL and the Wright-Patterson folks down at the Air Force Base in the Dayton area, and we're more than likely going to have that on June 25th. You'll see some more information going out very soon on that. I will follow up with everybody with a copy of the briefing and the contact information that all of our presenters provided. And finally, I'm not sure how you do the round of clapping and people standing up, but what a great afternoon and great presentations. Thank you all. I will lead the round of clapping for everyone. And just again, say thanks, stay safe, have a great day, and hope to see everybody very soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
This
Stay
will
well.
formally end our webinar for the day. Thank you once again.